Welcome back to Cask and Point. Today is part 3 of our tour of trying every single Stagg Junior batch ever. Now, if you didn't catch the last few videos, in last week's video we tried batches 18, 22A, and 22B, and then the week before that we did 23A, 23B, and 23C, and then in the week before that we reviewed Stagg 24A on its own. And so I'd highly recommend you check out those videos. I'll link them all in the description, and join us on this tour, a 7-part tour, if I include 24A as a part 1 to this tour, where we're going to try all the 24 batches that have ever been released from Stagg. Now today we're doing 14, 15, 16, and 17, which are the 2020 and 2021 releases. And in next week's video we'll do the 4 batches before that, and then the 4 batches before that, and then the 5 batches before that, so that we can get batch 1 in there. Because 2013 was a weird year, they only did 1 that year. But anyways, we have Stagg in front of us. If you want to learn more about Stagg, I talked about its history in the previous few videos. I'm not going to do that for every single video. I think it might be a little bit redundant, but I really want to try some Stagg. I think very highly of a lot of these batches, so let's jump right into it. Now, we're going to begin with Stagg Batch 14. Now, Stagg Batch 14 actually has the exact same proof as 23A at 130.2, and the only other 2 batches that are the same proof are actually batches 2 and 17 that we have here at 128.7, so a little bit of fun facts there, and it's understandable. Staggs range between 125.9 with 23C to 134.4, which is actually batch 1, which I do have a bottle of here, which is pretty cool. But these are all juniors, so 17 being the last junior, as they say, because batch 18, they remove the junior from the actual bottle. So we're trying the last 4 juniors, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun because I think these are some of the best batches in the entire set of 24. Now, batch 14 here is going to come out with a ton of cherry. It's such a fruit bomb on this. There's a little bit of sweet oak, dry oak, some pepper in this, a little bit of caramel and rye spice, and a little bit of wood funk. I think as we get older, the wood funk is going to increase. Stagg is known for having some really weird wood. I know I've tried a batch 9 and it was just the weirdest oak funk I've ever had on a bottle. So I think the oak funk kind of increases as we go back in the batches, but we'll see. I mean, we're going to find out in the next few weeks. But definitely some old oak funk on this, but really cherry is the most dominant flavor here. Let's try it and see how good it is. It's a great batch. It's a bit hot. There's a ton of cherry. The fruit just keeps going on it. It actually kind of turns into like a cherry plum candy even. It's that sweet. And then there's a little bit of caramel, a little bit of oak, but honestly, I've always found batch 14 to be the fruitiest of all the probably last 10 or 15 batches. I haven't tried the first few. We will in a few weeks, but it's just really, really cherry forward. And if that's what you like out of Stagg, that batch 14 is going to be something special for you. But I'm looking for a little bit more balance in my pours, so I don't absolutely love it. Like, I don't think this is at the ranks of 22A. It's probably around on par with batch 18. I'm looking at probably around an 8.1, but as always, we'll go through it. We'll take 2 sips, and then on the 3rd sip, we'll go and rate them all. So yeah, I mean, there's just so much cherry on this with a little bit of, kind of caramel, oak funk. I think that's this batch. Let's take one more sip and then move on to batch 15. It's really good. The finish is around medium length. It's not particularly long, but it's not particularly short. I'm not blown away. I actually have an Old Forester pick here, which is from Warehouse H, Floor 8. And honestly, I might even like it more than batch 14 because that's just such a cherry bomb for me. And it gives me a bit more flavor and a bit longer of a finish. So, I don't know, that 14 is a little bit disappointing on this time around. When I had first tried it, I liked it a little bit more, but I'm just not getting a ton of flavor. I feel like I'm just getting a lot of cherry and almost nothing else, which is a little bit disappointing, but let's move on to batch 15. So batch 15 here is 131.1 proof, and I've actually always loved batch 15 just because I think 65.55% alcohol is just really cool on a label. So batch 15 has always had a special place in my heart just because of that. I also found this in a store once. Random store just a couple of months ago was selling it for, I believe, $200 in cash they said they would take. And I didn't buy it. And then, they told me it might be available in a couple days, And so I showed up like the next day thinking I could totally buy it. And then they told me they sold it. So I'm not sure how batch 15 from the fall of 2020 existed in this store for possibly 4 years, and then the day I showed up, the next day they sold it. I don't know. I don't know if it's some weird thing where the distributor had just given them the batch 15, but sometimes weird things like that happen where the distributor just sits on them for that many years, and then eventually the stores get them. And we don't notice it on most things because most things don't really change over a couple of years, but when we have batched products that are annual or, biannual like this, then we notice. So anyways, let's try some batch 15. Tons of spice. Yeah, there's so much spice on batch 15 here. There's a little bit of caramel, a little bit of cherry, a little bit of oak funk, but that is a very rye forward, dill forward batch here. Let's try it and see if those flavors connect. Spice just keeps going. This is one of the spiciest batches I've ever had, maybe even the spiciest batch I've ever had. It's good. It drinks a little bit hot. You kind of just a ton of caramel, spice, oak. Very little cherry, actually. Very little. I mean, almost a polar opposite of batch 14 here, which is really interesting. They say that Stagg Junior batches in general are much more similar to, say, Elijah Craig batches, and we will be doing a series soon where we try every single Elijah Craig batch, so we'll see if that's true. But, I mean, these batches are pretty far apart. There is that base of the kind of oak funk and stag funk to it, but it's actually very different, but I'm not really sure which one I like more. I mean, it's fruity versus spicy. It's a good batch. I'm actually a little bit less disappointed that I passed on it for $200 initially and then didn't end up being able to buy it. Because I'm not like blown away by it in a way that I am blown away by some other Staggs. I still think 22A is the leader so far here after batch 15. Let's take one more sip and let's really find out. It's good. The finish is also about medium length. I mean, they both might even be closer to short to medium length. Like, there's flavor there, but I'm just not that impressed. I mean, I'm holding these to very high standards. These are Stagg batches. These are Stagg batches that both command around $230 on secondary. And so I'm expecting a lot. I'm expecting them to be much, much better than more recent batches, but they're really not. 22A and 18, which you guys saw last week. I actually tried them yesterday, so they're very fresh in my mind, and these really aren't any better. I'm gonna hold off in saying that they're worse just yet, but they really aren't any better than those two batches. But let's move on to batch 16 and see if it has something better for us. Now, batch 16 is a 130.9 proof, so actually every batch today is above 130, which is pretty cool. And as a reminder, the median proof is 130.2, meaning that there are 12 batches below that, 12 batches above that, or something like that, because there are two batches that are exactly that, so I don't know, 13, 11, something like that. So all batches that are relatively high proof, except for the batch 17, because the batch 17 is going to be 128.7, but we'll get there in a second. Let's see this batch 16 here. Wow, tons of caramel on that one. There's some red fruit, some cherries and plums, a little bit of rye spice and dill. I mean, look, these all have very similar tasting notes. Like, I'm not gonna just pick up one of these and get, a ton of like foresty flavors or actually some Staggs do, but I'm not gonna get, it's not gonna taste like a red currant or like, I don't know, like rye candy or something. I mean, these are pretty similar batches with pretty similar flavor profiles. It's just what they actually emphasize is very different. Where I had red fruit on one, spice on the other, and now I'm saying this is caramel, and this is actually a lot of honey too. Caramel, honey, some red fruit. Not really any spice on that nose. Let's try it and see how much these flavors come through. A lot more rye spice on the palate. It's gonna start with the caramel and honey and really get into a nice rye spice. The finish on that one is actually a little bit longer than the other two. I'd say this one is medium, but leaning more towards medium long. It's actually really nice. There's a little bit of pepper taste in there. It's actually not super complex. In a way that, these are slightly more complex, but honestly, none of these have been particularly complex, which I'm a bit surprised about. But, I mean, that's a good batch. I think, as of right now, I might like it more than those two, but we'll see. We'll take a second sip here and then move on to batch 17. Yeah. I mean, if the caramel and honey came through as much on the palate as it did on the nose. I definitely like it a lot more, but there is a lot of rye spice on this. There isn't really much cherry. There is some oak funk. There is a little bit of sweet oak and dry oak and stuff like that, but I don't know. I'm just not as impressed this time around, and maybe this is because I tried 3 Stagg batches yesterday, but these are all around an 8, which is good. It's very good. It's weekly sipper level. It's worth probably $150 on secondary, but I'm not getting any batch that really blows me away, and 22A is still better than I think than all of these, which is a little bit disappointing because, I mean, I would hope older batches, I guess I wouldn't hope older batches are better, but I don't know, just a little bit surprising. Now, we're going to move on to batch 17. Now, if you didn't know, batch 17 has a little bit of lore behind it. George T. Stagg, which obviously Stagg Junior is modeled after, has released every single year since 2002. Except, there was a weird year in 2005, they released like 3 of them, but they missed 2021. And they missed 2021 because they said that they didn't have enough good Stagg Junior. Enough good George T. Stagg. They quite literally said that because we usually produce approximately 30 to 40,000 bottles of George T. Stagg every single year, and we want to hold it to such a high standard, they were disappointed with the blends that they were making, with the barrels that they had, that they never released George T. Stagg in 2021. So what happened to those barrels? Those older oak barrels? What happened to them? Did they end up getting thrown out? Did they go into the next year's GTS? Well, some speculate that they ended up in Stagg Junior Batch 17, at least some of them. And some say that they get much older oak on Batch 17 than others. They even say that this is one of the few Stagg Junior batches that's a George T. Stagg killer, that people actually like this batch more than some batches of George T. Stagg. But let's sit down and let's really see what it merits. On the nose, I'm getting a little bit more complexity than the other 3. I think it's much more well balanced, where I'm still getting the caramel, a little bit of honey, a little bit of rye spice and cherry and plum, a little bit of sweet oak and dry oak. It's definitely like the same flavors as the others, but not one is really highlighted. Yeah, and I stand by that. I think there's a little bit more musty oak, which kind of indicates like an old oak smell on it than the others, but there's not a ton going on here. I mean, look, I've never found Stagg Junior to have a particularly impressive nose, and so I think these are only so informative. But let's try it and let's see just how good perhaps one of the best batches of Stagg Junior really is. Wow, there's a lot more old oak on that one. There's a good amount of red fruit that comes out of this. There's some rice spice. It's a really good batch. I have a bottle right here of it. I actually have a second bottle back there. That is really good. That is going to win the flight today. I think that's the best batch we've had so far. It's winning because it's well balanced, where I'm getting some red fruit, some spice, some honey, some caramel, in a way that I was really primarily getting one of those things in all of the other batches before it. But this batch is really bringing a lot of those flavors together, but then it's really putting it all in the backdrop of like an old musty oak, which is just really nice. But we'll take another sip here, and then we'll take a third sip, and then we'll rate it, and then we'll go back and rate everything. But that was really good. Yeah. I mean, it's actually very reminiscent of the George T. Stagg batches that I've had. I've tried 2023, I've tried 2019, I've tried 2015, and yeah, I mean, that reminds me of George T. Stagg a lot more than any other Stagg Junior batch that I've tried. The fruit on that is just a little bit more developed, where instead of just cherry and maybe a little bit of plum, I'm also getting some cranberry in there. I'm getting like a little bit of stone fruit, peaches, and nectarines. Not a lot, but the red fruit there just goes a little bit further. I would even say maybe there's some like blackberry and raspberry on this. There's just a little hint that there's more to the fruit there. But then there's also an older oak taste on this. Man, batch 17 is good. And look, Batch 17 on secondary, on retail, tends to cost around the same as the others. This is the crazy thing here. Now, once we get to batch 12 in the next video, we'll see a spike in secondary value and retail value and all these things, and you know, unicorn auctions value, which is where I've gotten a lot of my bottles. With the more recent batches, they're all around $150 to $200. This bottle is really maybe $40 to $50 more on, like, you know, where people are trading them, where people are selling them in unicorn auctions and all these things, and even on retail stores, since, you know, usually secondary is indicative of what it will sit at a retail store or what it will sell at a retail store. And the fact that that is leaps and bounds better than any batch we have tried besides 18, 22A, and maybe a couple batches here, but it kills the 23s. It's better than 24A, and it's, to be fair, better than all of these batches here today and all the batches before it. The fact that this is worth the same is just ridiculous. Now, the one great fault of batch 17, in my opinion, is that proof. If this was 132 proof, I think this might beat most George T. Staggs. They had to nerf it somehow. They had to give it to us at 128.7 proof. They give it to us at like a short to medium finish because, man, that palette is incredible. I'm going to take one more sip here and then we'll move back. We'll give it a rating and then we'll move back. Stellar. Everything I could want in a Stagg Junior batch is in that. It's actually very reminiscent of the rare character KOAs, which I've done a review on the channel already, and I highly recommend you check them out. But honestly, the KOAs are kind of just a Stagg Junior batch 17 with a little bit more flavor, and which is like an incredibly high compliment to those KOAs. But it's almost like I'm getting so much flavor on that, and it's so good. But the fact that the rare characters actually have like a very similar kind of fruity, musty oak component to it, but just do it a little bit better is a little bit heartbreaking to me because I love Stagg Junior, but there is better out there. And those KOAs are something special. I think the best whiskeys of 2024. Definitely, you know, I talked about them a lot in the video. I'll you know, put the link somewhere on the screen, whatever. But man, that is a good batch. I am going to rate that an 8.3. I think it beats every batch before it. I think it beats many batches after it. I mean, it beats every batch after it. I think it beats most of the batches before it. We're going to find out. But when we eventually do a flight where we try every single Stagg Junior, I have a pretty good feeling that batch 17 is going to be in the mix. I think it's going to end up being top 3, top 4 all time, and possibly even higher than that. So we'll find out, but 8.3 for today. Let's go back to Stagg Batch 16 and let's give it a rating. So on the nose, I'm still getting a ton of caramel and honey, and I actually really like that. Like it's a very pleasant nose. I think it's a better nose than everything here other than the 17. And it's nice. I mean, there's a little bit of caramel and oak funk and just a tad of cherry, but not much. I mean, this is caramel and honey. If you really like those sweeter flavors on Stagg Junior, batch 16 can really be something special for you. Let's try it and give it a rating. It's really nice. It's really nice. The flavors kind of just keep going on that one. And I wish there was more red fruit because it's giving me all the caramel, honey, and maybe not as much oak funk. Like the oak is better on. I'm struggling to compare this to batch 17 because batch 17 is just so freaking good. But it has good oak on this one too. Not as good as batch 17, but it has some good oak flavor to it. And it has that caramel and honey and a little bit of spice to back it up. It just is missing a lot of red fruit that just takes away from its complexity. I'm going to rate this an 8. I think that's a solid rating. I would take it over 23A for what it's worth, but I just don't think it's meeting. Like, I think I take batch 18 over it. I think I take 22A over it. I definitely take 17 over it. And so, yeah, I think 8 is fair. Let's move on to batch 15. Still very spicy. Still, you know, caramel, spice, and oak on this one. Again, not a ton of red fruit. And look, I like balanced pours. I like the complexity is what's winning it for batch 17 right here. And so far 16 and what I got from 14 to 15 on the first time around just isn't giving me nearly as much complexity. But let's take this last sip here and let's give it a rating. Tons of spice. It drinks hotter than any of the other ones on this flight. And If 17 drank hotter, my God, I'm gonna keep raving about 17 by the way. Like to be clear, for the rest of this video, I don't know how long it's gonna be after this, but I'm gonna keep raving about this bottle because it's amazing. And I have two of them. And honestly, if I found them at retail or if I found them in a liquor store for $200, I'd buy them. And I'd buy like a case of them because they're just that good. But anyways, 15, it drinks a little bit hotter. It has a medium finish. I think its finish is a little bit longer than the 17. On par with the 16. I think the 16 and the 15 both have medium finishes, where the 17 has a short to medium finish. And it's just so good for the spice. And it lacks the red fruit. It lacks, you know, super like old aged oak in it. It tastes a little bit, almost a little bit younger than the other two, where like it's lacking a lot of that like old funky oak, which is a little bit disappointing. But honestly, I still like it a lot. I think I'm gonna rate it an 8.0 as well, really on par with the 16 here. I think today I would take the 16 more. I think in a previous day I did rate the 15 higher, and so these are really close, but I think they're both an 8. I think they're both worse than batch 18 and 22A and 17, but they're both good. But I'm not blown away. But let's move on to batch 14. Now, this was a fruit bomb the first time around. Let's see if it's still a fruit bomb here. It's still a fruit bomb here. Yeah, I mean, that's cherry galore. Like, I'd like to say plum and cranberry and other red fruits, but there isn't. This is cherry. This is cherry with cherry on top. This is an ice cream sundae with a cherry on top, but remove the ice cream sundae, and it's just the cherry. It's really good. It's really nice. It's really fruity. I like it a lot, but it's not winning many points on complexity here. Let's take this final sip and let's give it a rating. Yeah, I think because it has a little bit more old oak than the 15 and the 16, I am gonna take it over them. I think it's an 8.1. I think it's very good, and the fact that it's a fruit plus old oak is what I really like. Like, it's two elements here that I really like. Whereas 16 gave me a lot of caramel and honey and those sweet flavors, but really nothing else. The 15 gave me a lot of rye spice, but it didn't do anything else super well. The 17 gave me all these different things and did them all well, but 17 gives me two things really well. And two things that are being done really well are gonna be better than one thing that's done really, really well. So I'm gonna take 14 over it. It's gonna be an 8.1. I think today, batch 17 is the easy winner. It's not even close. I think batch 14 here is good. We're probably not going to see a return of it in a top 3 or top 5 flight video. It's good. It held its own, but it's just not going to beat the best batches of Stagg. I think it's probably a good like average batch. And then 15 and 16 here, they're going to be at the bottom. I think it's 17 at 8.3, 14 at 8.1, 16 at 8, and then 15 at 8 here. All good batches, all batches that I would rate higher than all the 2023s, but I think batch 18 and 14 are really neck and neck. And then our top two right now are 22A, and then in first place is batch 17 here. So I'll put the current rankings on your screen right now of, yes, we did 4 today and we did 7 before, so we're at 11 total batches, and you know, we're gonna catch all 24 of these soon enough. But I think with that, thank you all for watching. I hope you guys have a lovely rest of your day. Next week, we're doing batches 10 through 13, 2018 and 2019. Make sure to check that video out. And so I will see you all in the next one.